Hello everybody, it's Jonas here. Many of you have been following, maybe for a long time or a short time, my channel here. And I've never done anything like this. My pastor that is, I've been going to this church since I was born. And so he's been my pastor my entire life for 22 years now. And so today I'm happy to do this video with him. And I hope you guys will enjoy him. And this will not be the only one we do. We'll be doing plenty more beyond this. And so with no further ado, my pastor of 22 years, and he's been in the ministry for even longer, Brother Bob Cutler. I hope you enjoy. All right, everybody. Thank you for coming in and watching today. Today I have a guest with me. Normally you ever just see my face, and most of you are probably thankful that it's not just me today. And so today I have a very special guest with me, my pastor. He's been my pastor for 22 years, Brother Bob Cutler. But the entire time throughout this entire video and videos to come, you're going to hear me refer to him as pastor. Unless if you would rather be called archbishop of some sort.
Right Reverend or something?
Yeah, something of that sort. So,
okay.
I asked you to come today and share your testimony, share your story of growing up and a little bit of what your childhood was like, and then college, and then on into years of ministry.
We probably won't get that far.
No, probably not. No.
We can start somewhere.
Okay.
Let's see, I was born in northeastern Iowa. I was a kind of a post-war baby. I was born in January of 45. Of course, the war didn't end till mid-1945. But kind of a post-war baby. My father, during the war, worked as a civil engineer in the aircraft industry. He worked at a place called Bear Field in Indiana. It was where they sent the injured fighters and airplanes back from the Second World War to be repaired. He did that. He was too young for the First World War and too old for the Second. So he joined the civil service and served in that way. So he was there. My rest of the family was in a little town called Huntington, Indiana. And Mom, of course, I have 3 older sisters. And so I was born in January 1945. I was not particularly welcomed by my sisters because they were looking forward to having a little sister. And I turned out to be a boy. And matter of fact, Mom tells me that they wouldn't even come to the hospital to see me since I was a boy and had to be drugged in, kicking and screaming. They dressed me up as a girl as often as they could when I was a little boy, and I've got a picture of that somewhere, hidden away. So anyway, we moved to Iowa when I was 3, northeastern Iowa, after the war was over and everything, and I don't know how much you want to know. It's kind of an interesting story. We lived on a little, kind of a small farm there in Huntington, Indiana. I've seen pictures of it. Matter of fact, visited there years ago with Mom. Neat little place, had a pond and had ducks on the pond, had a field where Dad used to grow, had his garden and everything. And there was a fellow in town that really liked that place. So he kept after Dad. He said, "Stan, you got to sell me that part." "No, I don't want to. We're happy there." And "No, Stan, you got to sell me." And he kept bugging him. And Dad said finally he got so mad he just named him an outrageous price so he'd go away. And the guy accepted. So they ended up selling the property. Dad didn't want to go back on his word, so they sold it and moved to where he was originally from, which was northeastern Iowa.
Okay.
So got there and didn't have a place, but my mom was from Cedar Falls originally, and her brother had a place and had 3 acres of land next to it. So they saved up some money and bought that land, and we lived with my uncle and his wife for, I don't know, a couple of years probably. Mom and Dad wouldn't do anything until it was paid for, and so they finished paying off the property, and then they saved up enough money where they could put in a basement house, and with the idea of adding upstairs on it when they could afford it. So we lived in that basement till I was 16. So they saved up enough money to put a upstairs on it. So anyway, that was my growing up. There was a preacher in the church that my parents went to in town, Calvary Baptist Church in Cedar Falls. I say he was a preacher. He went to Moody Bible Institute for 1 semester, but he was a very likable guy, had a lot of charisma, and a good preacher. And they talked him into starting Bible study in church in the area where we lived, which was at that time was called North Cedar, because there wasn't any churches out there. So they found a meeting place. It was called the Old Oaken Bucket, or before that it had been called the Silver Slipper. It was a nightclub.
Wow.
And of course they didn't use the nightclub on Sunday. So what they would do is Mom and Dad and some of the folks would go in on Sunday morning and sweep up all the cigarette butts and throw away all the beer bottles and spray air freshener and set up some chairs, and that's where we had church.
Wow.
for a while. And it was a country church, and it took off. A lot of folks really liked Pastor Holm, that was his name. And like I say, he was very charismatic and very likable guy. And so the church grew, and eventually moved to a place called the Cedar Valley Service Center, and then eventually moved to an old storefront, and Pastor lived in the back with his 3 boys. We had church out front. Anyway, growing up, went to school there in Cedar Falls, and back in the day, of course we grew up pretty carefree. We'd get on our bikes and take off after lunch, tell Mom we'd be back for supper, and they never basically worried about us. We were gone all day.
Mm-hmm.
We'd ride all over and do this. And we had 3 acres of land, and had a family that lived down the street, a German family, the Heidemans. And the Heidemans had about 12, 14 kids. I don't know, they had a house full anyway. And there were 3 or 4 boys that were about my age. And so we became good friends. It was kind of neat because if I had a falling out with one of them, there were 2 or 3 others I could play with, And
there you go.
Yeah, they'd come down to our place, and I'd go down to theirs. We hung out a lot. Basically, a pretty carefree childhood. When I'm guessing about 6 or 7. Of course, I was in church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, vacation Bible school, did everything church had. We were there. Dad was on the road a lot. He after we left Indiana, he bought a dump truck to haul gravel, and so he'd take different jobs all over the state. So he was gone, especially during the warm months. He was home some in the winter. But Mom became very active in the church and headed up Bible school, taught Sunday school. She was in the church. She was Mrs. C, and a very integral part of the church. So I grew up in church. I heard the gospel. I knew about Christ dying on the cross. I was very aware of all of the doctrines, as much as a kid can be.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was about 6, maybe 7, and I'm kind of not sure the exact time, but I do remember the instance very well. We were I was in Mom and Dad's bedroom, sitting on the bed, talking to Mom about something. And I remember asking her, do you have to be in a revival meeting at church to get saved? Because that's where I'd seen people, get saved. Oh, no, she said, you can get saved anywhere, anytime. And I remember telling her, I think I'd like to do that. So she showed me the gospel, and I remember getting down on my knees and praying with her. That's as much as I remember, because growing up, of course, I was in church, and I was a church boy, and like I say, vacation Bible school, Sunday school, summer camp every summer, Christian camp and everything. And so I was pretty much immersed in it, and it wasn't until probably I was 14 or 15 that I began to set my sights on the far country, so to speak, like the prodigal son. And I was still living home. I was still in church, still outwardly going along with everything, but my heart started to pull away. And in those days, there was a movement called the Greaser movement, and I don't know if they made a movie, Grease. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it or not, but with John Travolta. But the Greasers were they had ducktails, hair set up, and had black leather jackets and what they call engineer boots, and they wore their jeans down low enough that if they sneezed, they might lose them.
Oh no!
They were the greasers. Well, I wanted to be one. I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to be cool. I wanted somebody to notice me. And couldn't afford a black leather jacket, but Mom bought me a black plastic jacket. and I remember let my hair grow long enough where I could get combed in some ducktails in the back. And then if you wanted to be cool, you had to smoke. And my friends did. And so when I was 14, 15, I went to the gas station, got me a pack of Marlboros, and started smoking. And then got a little older, and if you wanted to be cool, you had to drink alcohol and go to the field parties. And I got involved in all of that. But all that time, I still went to church. And Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, still outwardly going through the church thing. Matter of fact, when I was 14, 15, Youth for Christ had a convention in Washington, D.C. called Capital Teen Convention. And let's see, it was 1960, so it would have been 15. And three of us guys from the church, pastor's son, and another fellow, myself, we saved up money and we went to D.C. and went through the whole Billy Graham preached. They showed the film Monkey Business, and I was still outwardly going along with the program, but my heart was in another direction. And so I, partially because of that, and partially because I was basically a very lazy person, I'd sleep in, miss classes. And the beginning of my senior year, the guidance counselor called me in and said, Bob, there's no way you're going to have enough credits to graduate. You missed too many classes. And but in order to keep up pretense, I stayed in school. I wasn't able to graduate with the rest of the class. And that was all of this time. My mother had held on to the idea that I was going to serve the Lord. And that's, if you'd seen me back then, you thought there's no way that's ever going to happen. But she never gave up on that. Because, as I said, I have 3 older sisters. And she told me much later that she was very, 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 very concerned to have a son so he could be a preacher. And so that's what she prayed for. And I was born a son. And when I was just a few weeks old, they were going to church in Waverly at the time, and they took me to the front of the church and dedicated me to the Lord. And but all that meant nothing to me as a teenage boy. I was just I just wanted to fit in. I wanted to be cool. And the group that I chose to be cool with was on a dead end road to nowhere. And so high school graduation came around, and of course I couldn't graduate, but Mom kept up the pretense. She had a graduation party for me at the house, even though I didn't graduate. Gave me a gift of luggage, which I guess is kind of an unwritten message. You're going to be going somewhere, son. Uh-huh. And she kept pestering me to go to college. And of course I'd missed so much. I hadn't taken a book home from school since 6th grade probably, and grades were very, very poor. But she kept after me, and I guess I wanted to make her happy, because in the back of my mind I felt real guilty about all of the embarrassment and shame and disappointment I caused my mom and dad. So I said okay, whatever. So I sent in applications to Prairie Bible Institute in Canada, Moody Bible Institute in Chicago, and a little school that nobody ever heard of up in Owatonna, Minnesota called Pillsbury Baptist Bible College. The reason I did that is one of the girls from our church had gone there for a semester and dropped out. And I did that to satisfy Mom, because I thought when they hear about me and they don't have a diploma, they're going to pass on me, and I'm going to join the military and get out of this podunk town. That was my plan. And so anyway, Pillsbury wrote back and said they would accept me without a high school diploma on academic probation. Well, it didn't fit into my plan, but I guess I'd kind of given my word to Mom, so I thought, well, I'll go there for a semester, make her happy, and then join the military next summer, because this was halfway through the year. And so I did. They packed me up, drove up to Owatonna, 125 miles from Cedar Falls, wasn't all that far. Drove me up on a Saturday and dropped me off January 18th, 1964. And I remember I had a green corduroy jacket that I wore. And in the right pocket was a pack of Marlboros, because I planned to live there. Basically, like, I was going to sneak around and do the things there that I'd done at home, I thought. And I got there and something happened. I was surrounded by a bunch of genuine Christian young people. This college was small, 400 students, something like that. But these guys and girls were real. And I guess maybe there was probably a teenager or two in our church, because we had a large youth group, even though it was a small country church. There were probably some of them that were real, but I didn't pay any attention to them. But I guess when that started to soak in, I realized how phony I was. I had this outward profession of salvation, but nothing real in the heart. And so what I found out after I got there is if you were a student at Pillsbury, you went to Sunday school, you went to church, you went to Sunday night church, you went to Wednesday night church, you went to chapel 3 times a week. You were in your dorm room by 10 o'clock, lights were out. At 11 o'clock, you showed up for class. I mean, it wasn't the military, but it was kind of the Baptist military.
Oh.
And so, man, I was a fish out of water. And anyway, of course, everybody went to church. So I remember that Sunday night, January 19th, 1964. And there was a pastor there by the name James Hunt. And we called him the crying preacher, because he'd get to preaching, he'd get to crying, and he was a very sincere guy. And so we were sitting there. It was kind of a college church. All of the students who didn't go out on weekend extension went to that church, basically, and so it was packed with college students. And so I'm sitting there, and they asked if we have a testimony service. Well, I wanted to make a good impression. And I was used to being a phony. I was pretty good at it. So I thought, well, I'm going to give a testimony. And so I stood up. I tried to think of something to say. And I remember something Pastor Holmes said back home. Jesus saves, keeps, and satisfies. I thought, well, that sounds pretty good. So I stood up and introduced myself, and I said, the pastor of my home church said Jesus saves, keeps, and satisfies. And I find that more true every day. Big liar. But anyway, so he preached something. I had no idea in the world what he preached. But when he gave the invitation, I don't know if it was the peer pressure of all these genuine kids, or the fact that my phoniness, and I felt guilty about it. But the reality hit me that I was not a Christian. Mm-hmm. That I made a profession when I was 4 or 5, or 5 or 6 or 7, and maybe the Lord counted that, but I never counted. It never meant anything to me. And so I went forward, which was I had to struggle with that, because I'd already stood up and given testimony. Now I'm going to go forward and admit that I'm not saved. Mm. So, but I did. One of the best, smartest things I ever did. I went forward, and just so happened that the college president, Dr. Monroe Parker, just a nationally known evangelist, a great preacher, he happened to be standing there in the front row. And I told Pastor Hunt why I'd come. I didn't know for sure if I was saved. And so he said, Dr. Parker, would you take this young man and talk to him? I said, sure. He took me up to a choir practice room there, Grace Baptist Church in Owatonna, and took the Bible in John 3:36. He that believeth on the Son hath everlasting life. He that believeth not the Son shall not see life. And he said, you believe that? I said, yeah, I know that. He said, you want to do that? Yes, I do. And so he knelt down with me, and I prayed and trusted Christ as my Savior from my heart, not just my head, not just my mouth, but from my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And from that point on, everything really began to change. I started going to class on purpose. I wanted to learn, wanted to study. I got the far-fetched idea that maybe someday I could actually serve the Lord, whatever. Wrote home to Mom and Dad and told them what had happened to me. Of course, they were just thrilled to death. And got baptized in the college swimming pool, and because that's where Grace Baptist. They didn't have a baptistry at the church, and so got baptized in the college swimming pool. God gave me a friend from Detroit, Michigan, who came to college the same day I did, and was a committed Christian. Knew how to study the Bible. He knew how to win souls. He knew how to pray, and he kind of took me under his wing. And because of him, I guess, largely, and the fact that I was surrounded by Christian kids and had good faculty, I was able to get on the right track.
Mm-hmm.
If I'd stayed in Cedar Falls, probably would end up in jail. I would have inherited my dad's business. So he had a radiator business. Would have inherited that and probably ruined it. I have no idea. I don't want to know, but I just know that's how I got to where I was.
Yeah.
I don't know how deep you want to go or how far you want to go with that, but that was my experience.
Yeah. I heard a song one time that said, "Jesus, I'm so grateful for the man I'll never know." And I mean, I think just about every saved individual could say that.
Now, Sue, my wife, Sue, has said many times, if I had known you in high school, she said, I wouldn't have had anything to do with you.
Yeah.
And I said, if the me that I am now knew the me that I was then, I wouldn't have anything to do with me either.
Right. Yeah. It's it all stems around the grace of God.
Absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely. They just if I can capsulize something, the first time I got to go home for the weekend, of course you couldn't go home for a while when you first came because they wanted to make sure you were going to stay in school. And but the first time I got to go home, it probably been 8-9 weeks. I got to stay up late talking to my dad, and Dad was a very quiet man, didn't have a lot to say, but we stayed up late talking, and he told me then, he said, you know, son, he said, your mother and I prayed that we would have a son so he could go in the ministry. And he said, and he told me about them dedicating me when I was just a boy. And he said something I never forgot. He said over the years, he said, I guess maybe your mom and I kind of lost sight of that. And he said, you probably never knew it. But he said, evidently the Lord didn't forget.
Mm. Yeah.
That's one of my treasured memories of Dad. And I guess that's kind of the essence of the whole thing.
Right.
The Lord had His hand on me all that time. You know, kept me from ending up in jail or you know, going off the road when I was drunk driving or something like that. He protected me, and because he had a purpose, and He was going to bring me to the point where I could hopefully find that purpose.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Exactly.
That's probably more than you wanted to know, but anyway.
Well, that's okay. We have this wonderful thing called an editing process, and I can take out everything that you say, and we can just go with what I said. And anyway, that's a wonder. Thank you for that. Thank you for the testimony, at least until your college days. In the next video, we're going to cover a little bit more into your ministry time. And but anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, this is my pastor and has been for my entire life. Brother Bob Cutler.
Don't be too hard on him because I'm the only pastor he's ever had.
Yes.
So, you know, he's labored under a handicap all these years.
Yes. Yes. I've been. Anyway, we won't go into all that, I suppose. Right. But thank you guys for watching, and be watching for the next video when we'll be talking about his ministry and his time after college and where he went and what kind of happened after that. Yeah. So thank you for watching on this one. Have a good one.